So if you've made that decision, and that's an if, it's going to be different for every institution. Do we need to bring in someone from outside? There are really two common paths to make that happen. The first is a negotiation. You identify a firm or a team whose work you admire, and you think, all right, this team's going to be good to work with, and you work together. It's a collaborative relationship from the start, and that's a big advantage to this way of doing it. You work together to define who's going to do what the roles are, how it's going to work, and you negotiate an agreement or a contract. It's relatively simple, it can be relatively fast, and again, very collaborative process. The other way, sometimes you have to go through. If you're associated with a municipality, a state, or some other organization like that, you may be required to go through a process that's known as RFP, or request for proposal. There are days-long seminars given on RFP writing and how to deal with all that. I'd be glad to talk to anyone separately about it because there's a lot more to it. But very briefly, what you want to do is create a document that clearly identifies what your needs are, what you are looking for someone to do for you, and what the parameters are: budget, schedule, what the scope of work is, which means what it is we're doing here, and a defined process. How are you going to make a decision about this so that everyone knows sort of what's going on? This step, number 2, I think is really key, and that it's related to the first one of negotiation. You want to pre-select a few firms that you want to respond to this, right? So you don't just put it out in the world and hope somebody says, oh yeah, I want to do this. Pre-select a few folks that say, oh, we want to make sure that you get this and you know about this. And then if you're required to, you send it out broadly through whatever means you need to do, a newspaper, advertisement, and so on. Eventually you get proposals back, you create a short list, interview, and then negotiate with the firm. This is a much more involved process. I don't want to make too much of it, but it's a more involved process, and it's not as collaborative.
You may get the ones you don't want.
Well, that's an interesting point, but that depends on how you set up. Where is it? Here it is here, for evaluation and selection. Right, think very carefully about what those evaluation points are going to be. Because hopefully it's not all about cost. It has to be some about cost. But it might be about quality, about experience, about what other projects you've done that you can bring that experience to this table. So that all plays very strongly into here, into trying to avoid that, oh, what happens if we get somebody we don't want. So if you set this up carefully, you have a better chance of avoiding that problem. One thing that we strongly promote is the design-build model, also known as turnkey, which is what we did here. We do on a lot of our projects where the entire team is hired up front. And there are some distinct advantages to that. The partnership that is developed through that is extremely strong. Our entire team, our people here, but even our larger team, has been involved with this project for 2 years. And everyone is thoroughly invested in it, on board. We all came a few days early to help clean inside and get the museum ready to go. And I think that's, part of the reason for that is, we've been on the island 8 or 10 times. We've met with the staff and worked with the staff over 2 years. And we are very highly invested in the success of this museum. And that's in part because of this design build, because everybody could be in it at the same time. Some of these other things, a single point of responsibility, if you think of it sort of comparable to an architect and a contractor, if there's an issue, then there's this chance to say, well, that's their problem, that's their problem. It doesn't happen. It's one point of responsibility. Guaranteed price, back to the budget thing. We contract often, as is the case here, for a fixed price. So there's no surprises later that, oh, it's over budget. That does not happen. It's our responsibility to keep it in place. If you are change orders, I don't know if you work with change orders, but change orders are those little surprises that sometimes come later in a project. They can really have an impact on price. That does not happen, or at least happens very rarely with this sort of agreement. Proven experience record means that we've all worked together. We can show you projects that we've done together successfully. So that goes back again to this enhancement. This process saves you time It saves you money. It saves you time in a couple of ways, one of which is if you have a distinct design phase and then send it out for bids and out for tender, wait for that process, that can take several months. That has to be inserted into the schedule. This process removes those months. It's a particularly useful process if you're already on a short schedule, because that time can be put into development of exhibits rather than paperwork and advertising. So that's very important, and it also saves money. There are some published figures in other industries, related industries, that cite 15 to 20% savings in using a design build over a traditional design and sending out for bid. Now usually that doesn't mean the exhibits are cheaper, because usually you've established a budget and we work within that budget. So it's not always obvious, but what it means is you're getting more exhibit on the floor for the same money.